Howdy, I'm here in the Red Rock country of southern Utah. This area is one magnificent playground, consists of 5 national parks, numerous state parks, 2 national forests, and millions of acres of public land operated by the BLM. Make yourself comfortable so I can show you what I saw when I went camping in southern Utah. I barely traveled across the state line for my first stop, the Valley of the Gods. It's a smaller version of the famed Monument Valley, 30 miles south. Valley of the Gods is a primitive place. No tour buses, no crowds, no water, no facilities, and no fee to camp. According to Navajo legend, the large sandstone monuments are Navajo warriors frozen in stone and can be appealed to for protection. I camp below monuments and in view of monuments. Native Americans believe to lie upon the ground is to think more deeply and feel more keenly. They can see more clearly the mysteries of life and gain unity with the universe. This was the perfect place to shed my skin and leave modern society behind. The quiet here was deafening. I lived in silence. Native Americans believed silence was a sign of a perfect equilibrium. The balance of body, mind, and spirit. Next, I headed north to Dark Canyon Primitive area. I was slowly working my way to Arches National Park. Arches has a very limited number of campsites, and they're extremely hard to get. There are other places to camp close by, but they're always crowded. I was enjoying my solitude, so I remained camping off the beaten path. I spent some time exploring the area and continued to gain knowledge of the high desert I was in. My body adapted to the arid climate and almost daily dust storms. I marveled at the odd paradox of snow-capped mountains and unforgiving desert. I moved farther north into Manti La Salle National Forest. I found another primitive location to pitch my tent. It was 30 miles southeast of Arches National Park, which I visited on a day trip. Arches contains the highest concentration of natural stone openings in the world. The park preserves over 2,000 natural sandstone arches. They form in fins, which are thin slabs of vertical rock. The fins resulted from a collapsed salt dome and subsequent erosion. Openings form at weak points in the base and grow until they reach the harder cap rock on top. Bits and pieces of rock fall and the arch gets bigger until downward pressure from harder rock on top causes it to collapse. Just a few months after I visited the park, Wall Arch collapsed and was no longer an arch. It was the first significant event to a major arch since 1991, when a massive slab of rock fell from Landscape Arch, shown here. Inside this group of fins was Sand Dune Arch, a very interesting spot to visit. Entering through a narrow corridor, one encounters a world of reds. Pink, orange, brown, vermilion, and other shades of red were engraved into the walls and sprinkled into the sand.
The only thing that wasn't red was the sky, and it wasn't always visible. When I reached Sand Dune Arch, I was delighted that somehow the pigment in the arch was stronger than the rock behind it. That was a big help because the lighting here was very tricky for photography. The windows are a highly visited place in the park. Two openings close, but totally separate from each other. There is no denying their allure. It's a short walk from parking your vehicle. As soon as you see the openings, you want to go walk through them, look through them, and stand in them. You know the window will grow and sometime become an arch, and you know someday it will collapse. And now you know that you're part of a rich geologic history of one of the most geologically significant areas on the planet. I'll be right back with more from southern Utah. Located between Dixie National Forest and the massive Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument is Kodachrome Basin State Park. At an elevation of 5,800 feet, the park covers a little over 4,000 acres. Facilities include a 27-unit campground. Each campsite has a picnic table, cement slab, and fire ring. I felt like I was living in luxury. As proof, I offer up heated restrooms, hot showers, and the only patch of green grass for miles.
The nights are still pretty cold this time of year, always at least in the 30s and many times in the 20s, which makes for cold mornings, but morning's the best time for photography, so come on, let's go.
The most important aspect of outdoor photography is shooting when the sun's rays are at an angle and behind you. That means getting out in the mornings and evenings because the sun's glare at midday washes out much of nature's real colors, especially in the desert. In 1948, the National Geographic explored and photographed the area. They named the area Kodachrome Flat for the then relatively new brand of Kodak film they used. In the 1960s, Kodachrome Basin State Park was established with Kodak's permission to use the name. Late afternoon is a good time to start taping again. I spend the middle part of the day eating, drinking, and positioning myself for camera shots that work best in the afternoon and evening sun. I have different strategies for cloudy days, but there were no cloudy days. Southern Utah is a land of stone, sky, and sun. Kodachrome Basin has dozens of sandstone chimneys called sand pipes. They jut up from the valley floor or protrude from the sandstone. The pipes are all that remains of ancient geysers that quit spewing water eons ago. I usually have a location scouted that I think will make a good sunset shot. Sometimes the trick is getting there before the sun sets and things get too dark for the camera's eye. I barely made it this time. Bryce Canyon National Park was 20 miles west of my base camp at Kodachrome Basin. I came here early one morning as the sun rose on a geologic wonderland. I immediately started my hike into Bryce. I decided to spend the morning sun down in the canyon and the afternoon sun up on the rim. Bryce Canyon isn't real deep, so I was confident I could make that plan work. Getting in and out of Bryce was a moderate hike with one hitch: high altitude. The rim around Bryce varies from 8,000 to 9,000 feet of elevation. I came here from 5,600 feet and felt the difference in the air. After the series of switchbacks drops you a couple hundred feet, the trail follows an opening between giant pinnacles called hoodoos. The separation was created by a process known as frost wedging. Most of the precipitation here comes as snow. During the day, snow melts on the rocks and seeps into small cracks called joints. At night, the water freezes and expands up to 9%. Exerting tremendous pressure, it shatters and pries the weak rock apart. There were several interconnected loop trails midway down and other round-trip trails leading farther down. The hoodoos were magnificent. This area was at various times a sea, a seashore, a coastal plain, and a lake bottom. Each era left different sediments which in turn created the different colors, while wind and water and ice erosion formed the intricate shapes. The pink cliffs of Bryce Canyon derive their rich colors from minute amounts of mineral compounds found throughout the rock. Red and pink are from the mineral hematite. Yellowish tints are produced by limonite. Pure beds of limestone are white, while dolomite beds are gray. It was late April and there was still some snow left near the top of the rim. Sub-freezing nights and warm days result in over 200 freeze-thaw cycles annually. That means Bryce is still a work in progress. I made it back up to the top of the rim and started working the late afternoon sun. It was time to look down at the hoodoos instead of looking up at them. Because Bryce Canyon was not formed by erosion initiated by a central stream, it is not technically a canyon. Instead, headward erosion has excavated large amphitheater-shaped features. The low sunlight began to enrich the natural hues and deepen the shadows. The colors danced and the hoodoos basked in all their glory. The farthest north I camped was Goblin Valley State Park, a small park surrounded by vast stretches of desert. A paved road takes you all the way into 3,600 acres of parkland at 5,200 feet of elevation. There was a 25-unit campground that more resembled a trailer park. I was fortunate enough to snag a site on the edge of the loop. I was slightly off to myself. The site was for a tent camper with a pad to set up your tent. Like the other units, it had a cement slab, a table, and much-needed sun protection. The campground had running water, flush toilets, and hot showers. Those amenities were nice to have occasionally. The April winds often blew hard, and camping was a dusty experience. Cleaning up always felt good, and it was equally important to fill up my water containers. The Entrada Canyon Trail started in the campground and led to Goblin Valley. Entrada Canyon was sort of a miniature canyon. It was narrow with short walls. The name Entrada comes from the Entrada sandstone dominant here and all over southern Utah. Calcium carbonate is the glue that holds sandstone together. It is easily dissolved by rainwater and other forces of erosion. Layers of rock with greater proportions of calcium carbonate are harder and more resistant to erosion. That information explains a lot of what we've seen so far and the goblins we're about to see. Goblin Valley is 1 mile across and 2 miles long. The goblins are composed of Entrada sandstone with hard rock tops. The valley is composed of alternating layers of siltstone, shale, and sandstone. The weaker sandstone layers have eroded quicker. I left Goblin Valley and journeyed to the Horseshoe Canyon unit of Canyonlands National Park. It's a long, dusty drive through no man's land before you get to Horseshoe Canyon. Primitive camping is permitted along the West Rim trailhead. I enjoyed the wide open spaces, and now I enjoyed the lack of amenities. Horseshoe Canyon is of great archaeological importance. Prehistoric people painted and pecked figures on the sandstone walls throughout the canyon. The Great Gallery, the best-known panel in Horseshoe Canyon, was my destination point. The trail began on a slick rock surface that was marked by stacks of rocks called cairns. The trail scatters from time to time and would be impossible to follow without the stacked rocks. It's important to stay on the trail because it's surrounded by cryptobiotic soil crust that is critical to the high desert ecosystem. The crust provides essential nutrients to plants, absorbs and holds water, and helps prevent erosion. Slick rock, loosely translated, means slick rock. So it's a good idea to watch where you step. As the trail descends into the canyon, it becomes more defined and easier to navigate. The Great Gallery is a 6.5-mile round trip, descending 750 feet, and requires about 6 hours of hiking. I carry a heavy load of camera equipment and stop often to tape the scenery, so I came prepared for an 8-hour hike. I packed a quart of water for every 2 hours in this arid environment to protect from dehydration. Sunscreen, sunglasses, and a hat are vital because sunburn can also lead to dehydration. In addition, I brought food and plenty of stamina, for the hike demands it. It wasn't long before I passed some pictographs. These were typical of Barrier Canyon-style rock art characterized by tapering, usually armless, ornate figures. Horseshoe Canyon contains some of the finest examples of this rock art in the Colorado Plateau. About a half-mile later, I came to an alcove in the canyon wall. There were more rock art panels. Evidence in the park suggests hunter-gatherers spent time here as far back as 8000 BC. Archaeologists believe that some of the rock art dates back 4,000 years. No one knows for sure, though, what the rock art means. It was another mile to the Great Gallery, the best-known panel in Horseshoe Canyon. Not much is known about the ancient Native American cultures who were responsible for the rock art. Much is known about the later Native cultures. Reverence for the everyday environment was interwoven with Indian life. They lived with courtesy and respect for the land. They only took what they needed, for they knew that lack of respect for growing, living things soon led to a lack of respect for humans, too. After a few hundred years of ignoring their wisdom, our planet ails and our souls ache. Now is the time to learn all we can from their way of life. Climbing out of the canyon wasn't easy, but I was fueled by the mental images of all I'd seen in southern Utah. Once again, the Great Spirit had provided me with an opportunity to study in nature's university. And that makes me a happy camper.